Namaste. So I wanted to talk, well, I decided that since we're an interspiritual community, it would probably be good to look at the major holy days, for lack of a better word, that come up in other traditions. And actually, it's Tuesday that's Vesak. It's the 29th, because apparently that's the morning of the full moon. I thought there was a full moon every 4 weeks, but I guess I don't pay enough attention. Because then I started to wonder, well then shouldn't there have been like a full moon early in May, and shouldn't that have been Vesak? But then I realized that probably represented like an unhealthy nitpicking tendency. But speaking of that, this where did it go now? Oh, at the end of the first reading, it talks about what I think is a universal religious tendency. You know, Vesak comes out of the early tradition, the Theravada, as one day for birth, enlightenment, and death. And then it's almost like the religious thing starts to develop. Zen is later. Zen is about 100 of the Common Era, and Tibetan is much later. It's 800, the 8th century of the Common Era. But Zen kind of says, well, we could get 3 festivals out of this bad boy if we just separated them out. And yeah, you know, Christianity has a propensity for separating things out. And I guess that's okay, but if you get your whole year filled up with celebrating stuff that happened in the past, you don't have a whole lot of time to pay attention to what's going on right now, which is really where spirituality works itself out. It's good to know what happened in the past, important even, but if that's all you ever do, well then, I think you start to become irrelevant, and I think maybe that's Christianity's problem right now, is that either they're selling fire insurance for the afterlife, which is something that's not here yet and is way down the road, or they're looking back at ethics and morals as they were taught in the Bible, which is something that isn't here now either. I mean, that's looking at the past. And they never, well, but they quite often do not get around to, okay, how am I supposed to live it today? Except for a list of things that says, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. And I think a lot of people are left saying, well, okay, but what should I do? Well, tell me what I shouldn't do. You know, how do I grow? And there's all kinds of problems with even that whole notion within Christianity. Whereas Buddhism has always said, yes, grow. And it's kind of funny, because I didn't notice it until now, but on the back cover I put a little diagram of the Noble Eightfold Path. And I thought, oh, this is really helpful, because it's one of those that breaks the 8 things up into departments or categories. So you have 2 that are the division of wisdom, 2 that involve or 3 rather, that are ethical conduct, and 3 that are mental discipline. But then I was looking at the list and realized that right livelihood appears twice. It's number 5 and number 8. The one they forgot was right concentration, which probably means they didn't have, well, right concentration, and neither did I when I was saying, oh, look, there's a really cool image. But I think more than the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path is the heart of Buddhism. And the reason I say that is that I think the Four Noble Truths get mistranslated a lot. So it tends to come out as life is suffering. We do things to make it worse. There's a way out of the suffering, and here's the way. But I believe a better translation would be, shit happens. We do stuff to make the shit worse. There's a way to not be hooked by the shit, and the Noble Eightfold Path is the way. And it really becomes a non-religious religion of paying attention. Noticing what's really going on and recognizing that we add so much of our side stories to what's going on that it's barely recognizable. There's one of the examples people use a lot is somebody notices they have a hangnail and they think, oh, I should probably bite that off. And they think, well, wait though, if I bite that off, it might get infected. And if it gets infected, then it's going to be really gross. And if I don't do the right thing to take care of it, then that infection is going to spread. And before long, my hand will be gangrenous, and then my whole arm, and I'll probably have to have it amputated. And it's like, holy shit, I have a hangnail, I'm going to lose my arm. And it seems ridiculous, but we do it all the time. Sometimes we do it age appropriately. In middle school, by the locker, when you see a bunch of kids gathered saying, do you know that he said that she said that he said that she said? Well, okay, that's developmentally appropriate, but it's also true that maybe nobody said anything. And a lot of times nobody said anything. Or what they said, by the time it's done, is lost. And what's left is stuff like, I'm not going to let her treat me that way, or I'm going to not let him talk about me like that. And it's not, you see that it's kind of a distancing yourself from what really happened and what really was said, because we're really, really worried about something else, which might be how we look to other people. And I was listening to a talk by Krishna Das this morning, and he was saying that he used to be really worried about what other people thought of him until he realized that everybody else was probably all consumed with worrying about what other people thought of them, and nobody was thinking of him at all. And yet we go through all that, oh boy, I wonder what my mother's favorite. What'll the neighbors say? Honest to God, I came home one time, I was 19, still living at home, going to school, got home on a Saturday night about 12:30, not terribly late, and of course she was laying awake. What are the neighbors going to think? And I said, the neighbors are like in their late 70s and early 80s, they're not even awake. And if they are awake, they'll probably think I had a pretty good time. That was not the right answer, but it was the right answer, We get all caught up in worrying about things that either already have happened, and so we can't change it, or might happen in the future, but then again they might not. So we spend all this time strategizing and worrying about how to avoid this terrible thing that may or may not happen, and it never happens, and it never occurs to us that we wasted a whole lot of time for nothing. Instead of living life here and now. And that was the heart, I think, for me, that's the heart of the Buddha's message. And he tried all this other stuff. What's really funny is, I forget the name of the movie, but there's a Buddha movie. And Keanu Reeves plays the Buddha, which shows you that playing the Buddha will just kill your career, just like that. I mean, okay, maybe the Buddha was a pretty boy. I don't know. But it shows this thing where he gets his charioteer to sneak him out of the palace. And all of a sudden, he's been made to think that life is fine, life is wonderful, nothing ever goes wrong, nothing could ever hurt him, he's never going to die, because his father has kept these people away from him. But when he gets his charioteer to take him out for a ride in the city, all of a sudden it becomes really, really clear to him, because he sees elderly people, he sees people who are sick, he sees people who are dying, and as you might imagine, his whole world was kind of turned upside down. He said, well, if I've been told it's one way, and I'm out here seeing that it's the exact opposite, how do I make sense of that? Now, we probably aren't so fond of the part where he leaves his wife and son to go figure out the answer to that question. And as the story unfolds. That's weird. Something dinging. As the story unfolds, he as the story unfolds later, after he's enlightened and develops followers, his wife and his son eventually show up and start following him, which I'm sure was a great consolation to them. But what happens is he tries the ascetical route. He tries denying himself and thinks that maybe I'll awaken, and it was the practice of the time. And I mean, if you saw the Da Vinci Code, it's still the practice of the time in some parts of conservative Christianity as well. And the story is he only ate, I think it was 6 grains of rice a day. Okay. That can make us feel better that the Bible isn't the only book with some really crazy stories in it to make a point. But eventually he was supposedly near death, and a milkmaid came along carrying buckets of milk and gave him some of the milk and some rice, and he recovered. And then everybody thought he was a heathen, a shameless hedonist for having something to eat and drink. And so people stopped following him. And then eventually he became enlightened. So the question really is, I think for us, is the point trying to get enlightened? Or is the point getting to heaven? Or is the point whatever the end game of any particular religion is? Or is the point the journey toward that? Does it? Because after all, suppose we do go to heaven the moment we die, then we've spent 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years just sort of wasting time waiting for the big event. Which seems a shame, you know. It seems like even if whatever comes next isn't a matter of performance, life is a lot more interesting if we make good use of our time. Nobody wants to watch, well, some people do, sadly, reruns of Three Stooges movies that go on. But maybe the real point, as just about every teacher does suggest, and then religion tries to hide that they suggested that, is that the goal is right now. The path is the goal. The kingdom of heaven is among us. And it's less a matter of getting a certain grade or a certain evaluation or a certain, blue ribbon than it is just participating. Just impacting what we can, when we can, taking good care of ourselves and others, and trusting that whatever we can't affect will get taken care of. Or not. I can always tell when you're thinking.
It seems like Christianity is based on, well, all the 10 commandments and what's right and the Psalms. Whereas it's like you said, we're on this earth a long time. Some people are looking for the end date, they keep
Yeah. Right. Well, and I think there's something to be said for the benefit of the 10 Commandments, as if everybody followed them, forgetting about the problems with them and what they meant at the time. Like, there's a reason that don't covet your neighbor's wife is in the same commandment as his ox and his ass, because, well, his wife was his property.
Yeah.
So if we don't look at that, I mean, if everybody did follow the 10 Commandments here and now, it would be a better world. I mean, maybe the point really wasn't, or maybe it was a secondary point, whatever happens at the end. And maybe the point is, generally speaking, if we don't kill anybody and don't take anybody else's stuff and pretty much tell the truth, that's a pretty good start for being a decent human being. If we have understanding, right understanding, we understand things as they are, right thought, essentially, we don't sit there and perseverate on stuff or ruminate about stuff. Right speech, well, there's tell the truth, right? Right action would include not taking your neighbor's stuff, not stealing, not lying. Right livelihood says whatever we do to earn our living, we're going to do something that doesn't hurt other people. Right effort, well, try your best, right? Right mindfulness, well, pay attention, for God's sakes. And right concentration is kind of part of that. Develop the ability to, for example, really listen to our kids when they talk to us, or really listen to our neighbor or anybody else who might be trying to unburden themselves of something that they need to talk to somebody about. Right concentration says we can hang with them in that instead of going, look, there's a puppy. Or let me check my email, or
Yeah. My kids are always on you can't talk to your, I shouldn't say, I still look at home. They always have their phones on. What's that? This is talking to my daughter across my work and all the way.
Yeah, we disconnected.
Yeah. You get the full attention.
I forget where I heard the story about a group of people that gets together and has lunch every once in a while, and they put their phones in a basket, and whoever reaches for their phone first has to pay.
Ah, that's a good idea. Something that's so important that's going to pop up in the
Yeah, what's going to happen that needs our attention right this minute, short of the building's on fire,
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, your phone isn't going to tell you the building's on fire. You're going to smell that first, probably.
I wish that there was maybe there are more teachings that speak to kind of the peaks and valleys on the path,
Mhm.
because I know it's not going to be just a steady trek to nirvana, but are there like old school spiritual teachings that address depression or anxiety or overwhelm or chronic pain or those kind of things that can really knock you off center, and kind of, even if you believe that all this stuff is true and important and you want to embody it to the best of your ability, or there are times when you can't and you have to kind of retreat and refill. I don't hear it a lot. I mean, I hear some new agey stuff about it, but it always seems, just be kind to yourself, and then you're going to, for me, sometimes it's really just a waiting game, and no amount of spiritual anything brings me out of it. I just have to take a break and self-flagellate and maybe I don't have to, but that's kind of the cycle that I am in. Like, I am in excruciating pain. It's a condition that won't get better. Right now, it is unbearable to me, and I have all these responsibilities, and I can't tend to one of them right now. So, what do I do with that? How do I keep thinking of myself as a honorable, noble, kind person who, when you want to contribute but you can't? That's a tough position to be in. Like, I don't want to be the fucking person who needs to be healed anymore. I want to be the healer. That's what I want to bring. And that's not my path right now, and it's so frustrating. It's like, I'm not asking to be too rich, or I just want to be functioning so I can help for people in my little circle. And when I can't do that, I'm like, I don't know how to do that, and I don't know what teachings to lean on at these times. I really don't. Therese? Or the obstacles to the path?
The obstacle is that. I mean, the I don't think it's supposed to be easy. I think it's especially pop Christianity tries to sell people this idea that if they go and say this little prayer and then show up at church, everything's going to be gravy, and they'll just coast right along, and that's why when things go south, as inevitably they do, all of a sudden God doesn't love them, they walk away. I think, for me anyway, it's working with that stuff that takes us from where we want to be, or who we want to be, or how we want to be. Working through and with, and then hopefully through that stuff, is a question of coming to accept what is, which is intensely spiritual. And I think dealing with chronic pain is intensely spiritual. It doesn't have the form outwardly that we might expect. You know, nobody's going to come on in swinging an old thurible full of incense and going, oh yeah. But if spirituality, and I really believe it is, if spirituality is about making sense of our world and our life, then dealing with that is intensely spiritual. Now, that doesn't mean it's intensely fun, especially during the more acute flare-ups of chronic stuff. But I think that if we look at depression, there's acute periods of depression where we don't have any choice but to look at it, and then it remits somewhat, and we avoid looking at it, which doesn't help, until it comes back and knocks us down again. And I think, you know, in that particular case, what that obstacle may be trying to teach us is, even though it's not especially fun, keep working and get to the bottom of it, even if next week it doesn't suck quite so much. And a lot of people who find themselves in that position, if you look honestly at your history, there was a time when you believed you could push through anything.
Oh, yeah.
I know, I did.
Yeah. I don't know if it's my age or what.
Well, maybe we were just fooling ourselves, and the truth is we could never really push through anything. We just...
Well, I had the energy when I was younger. I was like...
Oh, yeah.
Physical pain started, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Doubling back to a double. What could be more fun? How many 16s can you put in a row? But what if that wasn't living? I mean, what if part of the wisdom of growing older is that what we can't sort out in our minds, our bodies pretty much force us to live that. I mean, I don't think there's such a thing as a happy, joy-filled workaholic. But at a certain point in our lives, we think that that's great and fine. I mean, and the check is nice when it comes, but I heard something from a Hindu philosopher who was saying that the difference between the East and the West is that the East recognizes that you do need some stuff. I mean, you need food, you need clothing, you need shelter. But beyond that, what ultimately brings happiness is relationships. And so, if you spend all your time working and get a whole bunch of neat stuff, the cost of it is your relationships, your friendships, your family, then you have a whole different kind of poverty. Whereas in the West, we just think stack the crap up.
Yeah.
And we're not living unless we have to rent a few storage